Growing up, I always wanted to go on a bike ride at night. Something about it seemed really cool to me. It wasn't until I was 13 that my mum finally let me. She told me to wear my helmet, have my phone, take a flashlight, and set the parameters for where I was allowed to go. She gave me about 4 miles, which was a lot to me. So right after the sunset, I was off. I loved it. There was no people out walking their dogs, no kids running around. The temperature was perfect. It was really, really fun. So fun that I ignored the limits my mum set. You see, where I was biking was all walking paths. It was one of those grassy areas between two neighbourhoods. There's this long path that I went at least 600 feet at a 25-degree angle. I was flying down this hill, having an absolute blast, and darted right through the parameters. My mum set these limits for a reason. Everything on the inside was close to houses and people. The outside, more specifically the place where the path I was on led to, was barren. I rode along this path for 10 minutes before I could see some of the lights of the houses on the inside of the limits. After 15 minutes of riding this long dirt path, I hear singing. It was about 30 to 40 feet in front of me. I stopped riding to hear it better. It was a woman's voice, and she was singing Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles, but she wasn't singing the words, just the melody of the vocals. Her voice was strange. You know how you have phlegm in your throat and your voice gets scratchy? That's what her voice sounded like. I inch forward trying to see her. I get close enough to see the silhouette of a head bouncing up and down like she was headbanging. I decided to get my flashlight out. I'm thinking maybe this person is in need of help or something. Or maybe this is an insane person and the light will scare them away. So I take the flashlight out of my pocket, point it at her, and turn it on. The moment the light hit her, she stopped moving completely. She was facing away from me. She had disgusting hair that seemed to be sticking together in clumps. Some of her hair was ripped off too. She was wearing a very oversized bright red hoodie. I was almost too scared to move. I think she was too. I conjured up as much bravery as I could and I said, "Oh, sorry," in a very, "oops, this is the wrong room" kind of way, and she didn't respond. I turned off the flashlight and put it back in my pocket, and just as I was about to turn around, she screams. She screamed in an awful, awful high-pitched voice. I damn near shit myself. As I threw myself back onto my bike, I hear her voice getting closer to me. I book it as fast as I can. I don't look behind me, and I don't stop pedaling. Her screaming grew quieter and quieter until it dissolved into the howling of the wind. I once worked as a live-in staff member in a college dormitory. During the summer, we housed the few summer school students who remained on campus, around about 30 of them. One warm day in late June, my office received a call from a concerned sibling that she and her family were unable to reach her brother, who lived by himself in a room on the summer school floor. This wasn't unusual, as our office frequently dealt with students avoiding their kith and kin due to frayed nerves or general social awkwardness. Our normal protocol to check on the student is to try and reach them by our emergency contact information, and failing that, go check their room to verify they're living in the building, and perhaps available then and there. Have them call their family to verify we followed up on the original request. Also, we are only allowed to enter a room with another member of staff present to ensure personal safety of staff and students. I failed to reach the student on his room and mobile phone and was working short-staffed, so since I was on my own, I decided to pop up to his room and check on him. I arrived at his floor, and around 2 in the afternoon, the floor seemed deserted as I expected. I found his room number and immediately noticed the sound of a movie playing on the TV or computer from behind the door. I knocked 3 times and announced that I was a staff member checking on his health and safety. No answer. I didn't think that this was remarkable. College students are notorious for leaving electronics running while they were not in the room. I checked the floor showers and bathrooms and found them deserted too. I returned to his door and knocked 3 more times, waiting about 20 seconds each time I knocked. No answer. This is when my instincts started to buzz. I worked in residence halls. a number of years as a professional, and something about all the pieces of this puzzle weren't adding up. Family concerned about his health and safety, electronics running, someone must have started them recently within the time frame of a movie runtime. Summer school students and their idiosyncratic behaviour, something wasn't right. I was by myself, so I probably let myself get more worked up than I would have if I was with somebody else. A deserted dorm floor, even at 2 in the afternoon, often invokes Kubrickian memories of the Overlook Hotel. I decided that for some sense of closure or sanity, I needed to just enter the student's room even though I was by myself and technically not supposed to do so. I knocked on the door one more time just for good measure, again announcing myself as the hall director, and then I keyed into the room and my spidey sense went off even stronger. The room appeared relatively vacant. The student appeared to be living out of a suitcase, which is unusual for someone staying no less than 8 weeks for a summer school session. The bedding was tousled like someone had been sleeping in it, and all the lights in the room were on, and as I had suspected, there was an open laptop on the desk running on battery power playing The Matrix, but no student. I began to rationalise to keep from feeling unsettled. Surely this student and I had crossed paths on my way to his room. I'd never met him before, so I wouldn't recognise him otherwise. And perhaps he just went down to the lobby picking up delivery food for a late lunch. Sure, that's it. Then I turned to leave, planning on trying to reach the student later in the afternoon or that night. But as I turned to leave, I noticed another odd piece of evidence. The accordion closet doors, which are removed in most rooms due to disuse, particularly single rooms like his, were still in this room, and they were closed. Odd. I couldn't remember the last time I actually saw someone use those cranky, dysfunctional doors. Then my intuition spiked higher than ever. Shit. I realised I was alone in a room with a potentially suicidal student who may, in fact, have completed just that. And I'm about to be that guy who discovers the body and then has a shitstorm of paperwork and undesirable tasks, not the least of which would be calling the family to break the news. I felt like I was talking to myself when my voice cracked as I spoke to the closed doors and announced my name and title, and that I would be opening those accordion doors in 3 seconds. I fumbled with the latch on the door and finally managed to get them disengaged, and as I slid the doors apart, I was unprepared. I didn't really know what I expected. A hanging? A gunshot wound? I'll tell you what I didn't expect. A 7-foot, dark-skinned Indian man staring at me embarrassingly as though I had just found out his secret hangout. We stared at each other for a good 15 seconds without blinking, breathing, or speaking. I finally realised what was going on, and my natural emotion was disbelief. All I could think to say was, are you hiding in here from me? He looked at me and said, yeah. My heart was still racing. I turned to leave, and before I shut his door, I turned back to him and said, call your sister, she's worried about you. And, frankly, I am too. This story is 100% true. I experienced it myself in the summer of 91. When I was about 10 years old, I lived on Woodway Drive in the Fox Harbour Apartments in Paducah, Kentucky. I don't know if I said that right. If you look up the address, you will see some woods just to the north of the apartment complex. My friends and I played in those woods every day after school and all day on the weekends. Through the few years I lived there, we cleared a small area in the woods and created a fort from various things we got out of the dumpsters. It was our own place that no one else knew about, and it was awesome. One day, as we were walking to our fort, off in the distance we saw a man walking through the woods. He was walking parallel to us, but in the opposite direction, like cars travelling on a road, but with about 70 to 80 yards separating our paths. We stopped talking and stopped dead in our tracks when we saw him. We never saw anyone in the woods, especially not adults. When we stopped moving, he did too. He turned towards us and looked right at us. As I stared at him and was able to make out the details of what he looked like, I noticed what he was wearing and it looked like a Halloween mask, a generic mask, not Michael Myers, and carrying an axe in his hands. We stood there in silence, motionless for about probably 10 seconds. He looking at us and us looking at him. Then he started sprinting straight at us. We did the only thing we thought apparently to do, which was to run straight to our fort. We are probably about 50 yards from the entrance to the fort, and in those 50 yards he gained a lot of ground on us. When we finally made it, he was upon us. All of my friends scurried up a tree and we were screaming, but I was the last one in line. By the time I could try and climb the tree, he was standing right there by us. He was screaming like a lunatic and waving the axe in the air. I was scared, had no idea what was going on, and my mind went blank on what I should do. I grabbed a large stick and took a nice big baseball bat swing and cracked him on the face with it. He stumbled back a bit, moaned, and took the mask off. I recognised the face. It was the landlord and manager of the apartment complex, a man who was probably about 50 years old. He wanted to play a joke on us and thought that this was the most appropriate thing to do. He was a freaking psycho. Late to the party, but I've got one hell of a disturbing story that happened to me a few years ago in the Parisian metro. This happened at a station called Ville du Calvaire, which is a pretty nice neighbourhood actually. I had a regional train to catch at a bigger station to visit my aunt in another city, but first I needed to reach the central station, Gare de Lyon, using the metro system. So I entered the Ville du Calvaire station and waited for my train. There were only a couple of people on the platform, and I waited and waited, but still it wasn't coming. In Paris, it's not unusual to be able to see the next or previous station through the tunnel from the platform. So people stand on the edge of the platform and impatiently look into the dark of the tunnel to see if they can spot the next train coming, or if they can see it arriving at the nearby station. It's very small. So I did just that. I looked at the previous station through the dark tunnel and saw that the train was actually there, but it was not moving and not coming towards my station. I thought it must have been some technical issues, and since it was only a few hundred meters away from me, I figured it would eventually just start again and come. After a few minutes of waiting, it got to the point where I could miss my bigger train if I didn't leave the station now. So I had to quickly make a decision. Either know that it's coming and wait some more, or bolt out of the station, take my bicycle to rush to Central Station and not miss my train. But then, I heard some kind of weak moan coming from the tunnel. I figured maybe there are some technicians on the tracks, who I can't see because they're in the dark portion of the tunnel between my station and the other one where this train is standing by. Or maybe there's just some random person on the tracks and that's why the train has stopped, which happens a lot in Paris, but usually they tell you on the speakers. I walked to the end of the platform to have a better look at the dark part of the tunnel. I couldn't see a thing at first, but as my eyes adjusted to the dark, I got chills down my spine. Close enough so I could see that there was something, but far enough so it was still too dark and I couldn't be sure what I was seeing. I saw what roughly resembled a naked male human body lying on the track, but the position was weird and the angle was such that I couldn't see a head and wasn't sure of the position it was in. And then it moved. Thanks to the movement, I could make out a pair of hairy flexed legs that were extremely skinny and very white. The legs were facing me as if someone was sitting in front of you had fallen back from a chair. It moaned a little more, making my shocked self snap back into reality. Realising that it was an actual person and one in a very unfortunate position. I couldn't see much, but it was clearly someone who had been crippled. I figured it wouldn't have been any impact with the train already, as it would be much more messier, so this probably hadn't happened yet, but the poor guy seemed completely dizzy and barely conscious. I turned around and started running to the middle of the station where the safety lever was. If you activate it, it cuts off all the electrical current to the tracks, but as I was about to do it, I saw two security guards rushing the opposite direction to me, obviously to the rescue of the poor guy. It was clear that the current was already turned off and there was no service. I really wanted to know what happened exactly, but I was about to miss my bigger train, so I rushed out and took my bicycle. Later that day, I googled the shit out of this and checked all the news websites to see if there were any reports and to find out more. But I couldn't find anything. My best guess is that some sick person had kidnapped and stripped naked a disabled slash paralysed person and put them on the track for fun, in the hope that they would be squished by a train. Hey guys, thanks for listening. Click that little notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I try to do a video once a week and hope to do more as the channel grows. If you've got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit at r/luckyanavar. If you want to support me even more, please hit that like button and subscribe. Thank you so much, guys. And remember to always wear your helmet.